And you look at the Eagles and the Giants, both are all in on their young quarterbacks for now, right? Because if Daniel Jones, when you surround him with Kenny Golladay, Saquon Barkley, Kadarius Toney, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and now Jalen Hurts, dropping a guy like Devonta Smith into that offense with Jalen Reagor, Miles Sanders, and Dallas Goedert, it's prove it or lose it time. And if
It is Bird 365, a Tuesday edition. Mac and Mac guys here with you. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes with our first guest talking NFC East more than anything else. You should recognize him for the years he spent here covering the Birds in town. Now he's doing the entire National Football League with a lean to the New York Giants for Fansided.com. Matt Lombardo joins us here on Birds 365. Matty, Jody, Mac, Johnny Mac here. How are you, bud?
Jody, John, thanks for having me on. Hope you guys are doing well.
Hope you're doing well. Good to see you, Matt. Let's dive right into it. NFL draft. I think it was so interesting because the two teams you've covered in recent years, the Eagles and Giants, so much involved with each other. The Eagles trading up in the first round when you talk about moving ahead of the Giants to get Devonta Smith. Then you have even the third round. I'm sure you saw the kerfuffle in the Eagles draft room, little bit of a kerfuffle between Howie Roseman, Tom Donahoe. Pretty clear Tom wanted Aaron Robinson. The Eagles kind of tricked themselves out of that, go with the defensive tackle, Milton Williams. Your thoughts on the Eagles-Giants sort of igniting even more that rivalry?
Yeah, and this rivalry really intensified going back to Week 17 last year when the Giants thought that Doug Peterson and the Philadelphia Eagles had tanked that final game to keep the Giants away from winning the NFC East and out of the postseason. But look, I think what happened on Thursday night is Howie Roseman looked at the board, saw how it was playing out, and as I reported last week, and it had been out there a little bit in kind of dribs and drabs, Devonta Smith was the number one player on Dave Gettleman's board. I think Howie Roseman knew that. And, when he was available, I think that Howie knew that he wasn't getting past number 11. If he was sitting there at 10, he wasn't getting past 11. So he went up and got him. And I thought that was one of the more aggressive moves and a move that has a chance to pay the highest dividends of any team in the NFL. The Eagles going and get Devonta Smith at number 10 on Thursday night. I think that the Eagles draft kind of fell off on night 2 and night 3, but I thought they were really a big winner because of the aggressiveness. And I thought the Giants, in what they did moving back to number 20, they wind up getting Kadarius Toney, who's a playmaking receiver in his own right. But more importantly, they picked up a first-round pick next year. And they didn't have to, just like the Eagles didn't have to give up a first-round pick next year to go up and get Devonta Smith, the Giants got an additional pick for next season as well. So both teams are really well positioned. I think you talk to people inside the league, the 2022 NFL draft is a lot deeper and people are a lot more certain about next year's class than they were this one. And you look at the Eagles and the Giants, both are all in on their young quarterbacks for now, right? Because if Daniel Jones, when you surround him with Kenny Golladay, Saquon Barkley, Kadarius Toney, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and now Jalen Hurts, dropping a guy like Devonta Smith into that offense with Jalen Reagor, Miles Sanders, and Dallas Goedert, it's prove it or lose it time. And if Hurts plays well, okay, the Eagles have potentially 3 first-round picks to build around him. If he doesn't, they have the ammunition to go up and get the number 1 quarterback in next year's class. Same with the Giants. You have 2 first-round picks, and if Daniel Jones makes the leap, you can continue to build, whether that's on defense, on the offensive line, what have you. And if he doesn't, well, you have 2 first-round picks to go and get a guy who could be a franchise quarterback. So I really like what both teams did, especially with their night 1 trades.
Damn, you gave us some good stuff there, but I gotta start somewhere. I'll start here.
I know where you're going to start.
Well, I bet you don't. Was there any conversation that you know of, believe, sources told you off the record, did the Giants think about trading up with the Cowboys 1 spot to definitively get Devonta Smith? If he was their guy all along and he got through 9, the 2 corners came off the board and people were surprised, was there any thought that Gettleman would say, listen, the Cowboys could be talking to someone else. Maybe they only want to come back 1 spot. Let's throw them a draft pick just to lock in and make sure before somebody jumps ahead, which the Eagles did, and then you get your guy taking it right out from underneath your feet. Do you know if the Giants did or didn't approach the Cowboys about locking in at number 10?
Yeah, Jody, I don't believe those conversations took place. I don't have any sourcing one way or the other on that one, but just knowing how Dave Gettleman felt about next year's draft, and he talked about it in his pre-draft press conference. He talked to sources inside the team leading up to the draft. Their goal was to add draft capital next year. And if that meant, flipping a future second-round pick to move up one spot, if that meant flipping a third or a fourth-round pick this year to move up one spot, I don't think that the Giants were all that interested in giving up draft capital. But I will share this little nugget with you. Dave Gettleman said following the first-round pick during his press conference on Thursday night that Howie Roseman last week called the New York Giants and took Dave Gettleman's temperature about moving up to number 11 and asked if he felt comfortable trading with him. And Dave said, if it works out for both sides, I'm more than comfortable working on a trade with you. So I think we're going to start to see the stigma, just like we saw the Eagles and Cowboys make a deal, kind of erase the stigma. I don't think we're going to see much of a stigma around trading within the division because teams are now going to be much more focused about what works for them, not necessarily preventing somebody from their division from making a move.
Well, let's go down that path, Matt, because I think it's interesting. You bring up the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, that's a trade inside the division. The Eagles are trading with the team in the division. You're a Penn State guy. You know how talented Micah Parsons is. There's another level. I don't want to call it. I mean, you can imagine these two teams play twice a year in perpetuity. So Parsons turns into a superstar, and you allow the Cowboys to drop back 2 spots and add extra draft capital, third-round pick. That doesn't look good. On the other side of the coin, if Devontae Smith is killing the Dallas Cowboys year after year after year, that's not going to look good to Jerry Jones. How difficult are these trades inside divisions?
Yeah, John, I don't know that teams put that much thought into what the other team is going to do with the pick. I think they're much more concerned in today's day and age of how their board is stacking up with the value and how much, value for the first round guy matches with the position of need. So I don't know how much the calculus with the Eagles moving back was, okay, we need to, go up and get our guy, but we're kind of concerned that the Cowboys are going to draft Micah Parsons. I just don't think it works that way. They're in a situation where they need to find out, just like the Giants, if their quarterback can be the guy, if he can be a franchise quarterback. They just went 4-12. And that's why I don't really like some of the moves they made late in the draft. I thought they took some risks that they didn't need to take with a roster with as many holes as they have. But in terms of what they did in round 1, they needed to get one of the wide receivers. And, I built out my mock draft. I got 7 of the first 8 picks correct. And, the sense that I had going in was that all of those receivers were going top 10. All 4 were going to be gone, and I include Kyle Pitts in that conversation. And I think that Howie Roseman knew that he needed to come away with a weapon for Jalen Hurts so he can evaluate whether he's a franchise quarterback and potentially push this team back towards competing for the playoffs. So I think that was the bigger calculus rather than worrying about what the Giants and what the Cowboys were going to do behind them.
2 questions for you, Matt. 2-parter. Number 1, I think you correctly stated that both quarterbacks with Eagles and Giants this year are in prove me situations, that they've been given the green light. The Giants specifically upgraded talent around him as far as weapons go. So a lot is going to be asked of him and expectations. And the same with the Eagles, going up, getting aggressive. Devontae Smith to be his number 1 target. The Eagles aren't married, long-term contract or anything like that to their quarterback, Jalen Hurts. So you're right. Both are kind of in a prove-it type year. The Eagles took Hurts in the second round. The Giants used the 6th pick in the draft on Daniel Jones, and that gives them a little bit, I would think, a little bit more leash. But how long is that leash? If he doesn't come out and play like a top half of the NFL quarterback in this season, would the Giants be willing to move on from Daniel Jones?
Next year?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that you just look at what they've invested in him, right? You go out and you spend $45 million guaranteed on Kenny Golladay. You bring in a first-round pick, Kadarius Toney, at wide receiver. You're getting Saquon Barkley back. You have Evan Ingram. You're looking at a top 6 or 7 set of weapons in the entire league now if everybody's healthy around Daniel Jones. And you're looking at a situation where if Daniel Jones falters this year, you'll have a head coach going into his 3rd season. And if you're a head coach in the NFL and you're Joe Judge, if you don't make the playoffs after year 2, or you regress and your quarterback doesn't develop, and you have a general manager who's 68 years old, I just don't see how, if Jones doesn't continue to develop, and by continue to develop, I mean 25 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and you win 8, 9, 10 games. If you don't make that leap, I don't know how, with that many weapons around him, you remain married to him in 2022 and beyond. I just don't see it.
Matt Lombardo with us, man-sided NFL insider, does a great job. You know him from town, 97.5, did a great job there, New Jersey Online, covered the Giants as well. Matt, you bring up an interesting point with the quarterbacks, because never in this league, we just saw it with the Jets and Sam Darnold, giving up so quickly on a top 5 pick. The Eagles just ate $34 million, essentially, of dead money to move on from Carson Wentz, who they put so many assets into building around just to get him. Forget about the stuff they did afterwards in the contract extension. So when you look at the New York Giants and you say, would they be willing to move on from Daniel Jones in a year, and say yes, and you look at Jalen Hurts, the Eagles are giving him 1 year. Justin Fields is on the board for both of these teams. This is a big-time prospect. Why did neither, it seemed, of these organizations even think about Justin Fields?
Yeah, I know the Giants are committed to Daniel Jones at least this year, right? And everything they've done has been to build around him. I know that in the building, there's a lot of faith and a lot of belief that he will make that leap that I talk about, in terms of them remaining committed to him. As far as the Philadelphia Eagles go, that was puzzling to me. It really was. But, you look at, I guess they look at the second round pick. They look at Devonta Smith and think he's more of a sure thing. And Howie Roseman, much like Dave Gettleman, might be playing a little bit of the long game here, thinking that they can build around Jalen Hurts and hope that he develops. And if he doesn't, now you're armed with the draft capital to go up and get a rookie quarterback and drop them into a better situation, because the Eagles are a much better offense with a quarterback going into it with Devonta Smith than they are without him. So you're setting yourself up for a softer landing spot for a rookie quarterback if the quarterback you have doesn't step up. But as far as Daniel Jones goes, the Giants are happy with Daniel Jones. They're optimistic that he takes the leap. They've done everything they can to build around him. But, I think that faith has an expiration date if he has another year where he, throws 11 touchdowns and 10 interceptions and they win 4 or 5 games.
Matty, let me get your feet on him. I'm not a Daniel Jones believer. I wasn't from the time they drafted him. I didn't think he deserved to go at 6. I'll give him credit. I was a little surprised that he had a couple of big games in his rookie year that you might have said wow about, and that, okay, this might be a worthy pick at the top of the draft. Came back to the pack last year. I know Gettleman put a story out this week, or Judge put a story out, that other mere men would not have been able to play with the injuries that Daniel Jones played with last year. All right, so he's a bit of a tough guy. I'll give him that. I just don't like the kid's stuff. I don't think he's that good. He does not protect the football, either with poor decisions to throw and or fumbleitis that he has. I would bet more against than for Daniel Jones stepping up this year and locking himself in as the guy they're going to pick the 5th-year option up and begin contract negotiations with. Do you think he is the guy, or do you think that the Giants could be looking to change out quarterbacks next year?
Yeah, Jordy, not to cop out here, but I think the jury's still very much out on that, right? Because, you look at his rookie season, he played 2 games with his entire supporting cast fully healthy: Saquon Barkley, Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton. And you look at Saquon Barkley last year, he goes down in week 2 early in the game. So, you've kind of been in a situation where his receiving core has been Jody Mack, John McMullen, and Matt Lombardo. Maybe a couple games Sterling Shepard is healthy for, but he hasn't had his full supporting cast of weapons out there. And I agree that the ball security is a legitimate issue. Now, does that go away when you have a Kenny Golladay, one of the 6 or 7 best receivers in the league, on one side, and you have a first-round pick in Kadarius Toney, and you have Saquon Barkley, and you can kind of dictate the defenses what you're going to do and create some mismatches? I don't know. But I think that the arm talent is there. I think he has all the deep ball accuracy that you would want in a quarterback. But I just think that he needs a full season as much as you can. And it's the NFL, injuries happen, people get hurt, and I understand that. But he needs as close to a full season as he can get with his full supporting cast around him before you can make a real judgment on what he is as a quarterback, at least in my opinion.
Matt, take out the extra asset for a minute, and that's significant. I mean, getting the extra first-round pick to move down is a big thing for the New York Giants. But just talking about the player at number 20 overall, I thought that was a little bit early to take Kadarius Toney. I think he's more of a manufactured touch type of player. I think that's really difficult for coaches to keep going back to that in games when the real bullets are flying. But I said this yesterday on the show. I love Ojulari at 50, excuse me. If you flip-flop those picks, I'd say they were good picks. In other words, Azeez in the first round, Kadarius in the second round. So ultimately, I think it worked out well for the Giants. But you know how people look at pedigree, and they're going to look at Toney forever as a first-round pick. There's going to be some pretty high expectations there. Do you think he could live up to it?
Yeah, John, I'm kind of in a similar camp. I really liked the kid out of Minnesota, Rashad Bateman, more than I like Kadarius Toney. I think I like Elijah Moore a little bit more than I like Kadarius Toney. But you start talking to people around the NFL, and I had an executive tell me that this guy is a yards after the catch monster, that he's a guy that when you get him the football, he's going to make people miss. He has explosive speed. And that's really been the Giants' priority this offseason, right, is adding speed. They signed John Ross in free agency because, you look at that 40 time. Never really developed in Cincinnati, but it's that speed at wide receiver that's so dangerous. Toney is a similar athlete. And you look at Azeez Ojulari, a lot of people had first-round grades on him. And I think that, you look at adding the extra first-round pick, to me, and if you listen to Dave Gettleman and his value of the 2022 NFL draft, that first-round pick was the centerpiece of the trade. It wasn't number 20 and getting Kadarius Toney. It was getting that first-round pick for next year because that's just how much higher the NFL feels about the 2022 NFL draft class than they do about the 2021 class. So I like Toney. I think Ojulari was a great value play and plugs a significant hole for the Giants. They didn't really address the edge rusher spot at all in free agency. They let Kyler Fackrell walk. He signed with the Los Angeles Rams. And you just look at where they are. Pass rush was a gaping hole on a defense that made significant strides last year. So you got a playmaker in round one, offense outside linebacker who can rush the passer in round two, rather. And I really like what the Giants did overall in this draft. And I thought they were one of the bigger winners.
All right, Matt, here comes another tough question. Borderline unfair. You didn't like my last one because you said, I'm not ready. You got to give me one more year to evaluate Daniel Jones. Let's look ahead. You correctly stated that both of these teams, with deals they've made, have put stock in the cupboard for next year's draft if they need to. If Jalen Hurts doesn't win the job and prove a competent NFL, if Daniel Jones continues to cough up the football, they both could be big-time players for quarterbacks in the draft next year. Well, who the hell are those quarterbacks? You talk about next year's draft being better than this year's draft. In general, I agree. At the quarterback position, I doubt highly compared to the class we just had selected. I don't know anybody that I would look, this guy's going to be a top five, a meritorious top five pick in the draft. I don't know that one exists. Who are the guys that you think the Giants are saying, we better get those scouting reports updated because we might be going back into the draft looking for a QB high next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of these guys have yet to develop fully, right? And obviously inside the league, they have a lot more of a feel for this than you or I do because they have their advanced scouts looking at tape all next year. But, Sam Howell out of North Carolina is a guy who had a really nice year last year. I think he's probably going to be in the conversation for the number one overall pick. And you look at, Keaton Slovis from USC. He's another guy that I know there's that stigma around USC quarterbacks that, they don't always develop in the NFL. But those are two guys to keep an eye on. But if you think back to last year, Zach Wilson was a third or fourth round pick if we were having this conversation last April or May. Trey Lance, that hype train didn't really get rolling until the spring and the summertime. So, I look at the kid out of North Carolina. I look at the kid out of USC. Those are the two to keep an eye on for now. But, you just never know who's going to step up and have a monster year in college football and really help their draft stock. But you're right. You look at Trevor Lawrence, a generational prospect. I've had some people compare Zach Wilson to Patrick Mahomes, and in terms of just manipulating the pocket in a similar way to the way Tom Brady's been able to do that. So these are high-level elite prospects. There'll be one or two, there always are, that come out at the quarterback position, but I just don't know that those guys have really emerged yet, and we're going to find out more about them in October, November, December.
Yeah, you're right, mate. Matt and Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, same situation. They came up the board. It happens every year in the modern NFL. You're going to see quarterbacks rise to the top of the board. I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, Matt, so I'm going to throw it at you. Get back to the Eagles. You mentioned a couple times you like the first round pick, some of the later round picks, not as much. What didn't you like about the Eagles draft haul?
Well, I like the Landon Dickerson pick in a vacuum, right? Here's a guy who can be, versatile enough to play center or either guard spot. Didn't allow a sack since 2017, but hasn't really been healthy as the two ACLs. And if you're 4-12, I don't know that you take an offensive guard that early. And again, he can step in and be the long-term heir apparent to Jason Kelce at center, but I don't know if that's the direction you go in with that roster in round 2. And then you look at, Taron Jackson, a decent enough pick, but the defensive lineman that they selected, great spider graph, seems athletic, but his production was never there. And I'm always a little bit skeptical of guys like Milton Williamson who didn't really have the production to match their athleticism consistently through their career. So that was a little bit of a question mark for me. But again, I love what they did in round 1. And typically, if you hit on your first round pick and he becomes a perennial all-pro, that's all anybody's going to think about and remember, right? So if Devonta Smith is an elite wide receiver, then people are going to look back on this draft pretty favorably. And I actually think that trade, being able to move up to get Devonta Smith, not having to give up those future first-round picks to do it, that's the type of move that sustains Howie Roseman's job security in Philadelphia.
Matt, I'll follow up Eagles with you as well. You've got a different perspective now covering a different team than when you were in the trenches day in, day out with the Eagles. So maybe you're getting a different view from other people's opinions. Nick Sirianni, new head coach of the Eagles, and his staff that he had a big hand in hiring. We don't know what they're going to be like yet. We won't know until they get out there on the field and we start to see plays and designs and results with the Eagle players. But everybody's got an opinion on a guy by what they had done previously and the personalities that they show in their media availabilities. Both John and I like Nick because he's very enthusiastic, but does that mean he can coach? No, it doesn't. Your sources, your feel, Nick Sirianni, first-time coach with the Eagles, good, bad, or indifferent?
I know this, Jody. He was very popular inside the Indianapolis Colts organization. He talked to people in the aftermath of him getting hired by the Eagles, and people said he's a bright guy, a rising star in the coaching community, kind of a brilliant offensive mind, and he's a guy that motivates people. And you see that in the press conferences, right? You see the high energy. You see you can tell that he's a guy that relates to people, and the Eagles have had some head coaches who have struggled in that department, over the last few years prior to Doug Peterson. But people who have worked with Sirianni in the past seem to like him, seem to think he has a lot of upside as a coach. It always remains to be seen. I walked into training camp last year and I saw Joe Judge take the names off the backs of jerseys, had players and coaches running laps as punishment for mistakes on the field during training camp. And you're thinking, okay, these are NFL players. You can't treat them that way. They're going to turn on him. And by week 8 or 9, the Giants are all in. There's a culture that's being built, and you saw them kind of getting better as the season went along. So, that initial feel, you don't always, you can believe it. You don't always have to trust it. Joe Judge proved me wrong, and maybe Nick Sirianni winds up proving my sources and the two of you guys correct. But he could go out there and be the most energetic and enthusiastic guy in the world. And if the players don't buy in, it's not going to work. So time will tell, but I think that he is very popular with people who work with him. And I tend to carry some weight with that.
Matt, I do want to get your thoughts on the other two teams in the NFC East and their hauls in the draft. From my perspective, I think the Washington football team did the best job overall in the division. But your thoughts on Washington and the Dallas Cowboys, the hauls they were able to secure in this draft?
Yeah, I really like what the Cowboys did. I know that they're catching a lot of flack because of the trade backs and not really getting value, but you're dropping a perennial all-pro at inside linebacker with Micah Parsons as your first-round pick. It allows you the flexibility, as we saw with Leighton Vander Esch. They didn't pick up his fifth-year option. Who knows if they're going to bring him back? They added some offensive line depth late. They drafted a couple of cornerbacks, which I thought, was their biggest need on their defense. And they're looking at it as they have Dak Prescott, they have Ezekiel Elliott, they have Amari Cooper, they have CeeDee Lamb. They have all the weapons they need on offense. They need to build out that defense. And for better or worse, I love the commitment to trying to build out that secondary in this year's draft. And as far as Washington goes, look, I thought that they were in a position where they have the best front seven in the league. They draft one of the 2 or 3 best linebackers in this class, making a strength even better. I thought they added a couple of nice pieces on offense, a couple of offensive linemen. And my sense watching them is there's an adult in the room now. That it's not Daniel Snyder giving up his whole draft to go and take Albert Haynesworth. It's a head coach in Ron Rivera who, has a vision, has a plan, has a mentality that he wants his football team to resemble. And I thought the picks that they made really embodied that strategy.
Matty, I got one more Giant question for you. We all kind of like their draft. I think John's point about if they took their second rounder in the first and their first round in the second, people wouldn't question it as much. Doesn't matter. They got 2 players that I think were upgrades for them this upcoming season. They didn't address the offensive line. And they have over the last couple of years. They gave Soldier a lot of money. They used their first round pick last year on an offensive lineman. Kind of had an up and down year. Soldier opted out last season. They didn't draft anybody this year. So it's kind of guys we already have here. We expect them to be better. Is that legit? Can that happen? How would you say the Giants are right now stacked up on their O-line?
I think it's the biggest question they face other than Daniel Jones's development, quite honestly. And you look at last year, it was kind of a disaster. You fire your offensive line coach, halfway through the season at the bye week. And, you watch Will Hernandez, who was a 3rd-round pick, seems to have really regressed. You drafted Shane Lemieux in the 5th round last year, hoping that he could develop into a starter. Pro Football Focus gave him an overall grade of like 31.2. So, his rookie year didn't go all that well. I know they're very optimistic about Matt Pert. They think that he has a chance to be a bookend tackle. Obviously, they believe that after not taking a tackle this year, after taking Andrew Thomas at number 4 overall a year ago. I like Andrew Thomas. I think he has a lot of upside. I don't think that you can play that well in the SEC and not develop. But they obviously are higher on that position group inside the building than people on the outside are. I don't know that it's going to, play out that way. I think that they should have taken an offensive line. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't take a lineman, but we're going to see here. And you have Pat Flaherty coming in as an offensive line coach, a veteran guy. I think the Giants believed that a lot of their issues last year stemmed from coaching and not talent. New coaches, same talent. We're going to test that theory, it seems like.
All right, Matt, last one from me. Good to see you, by the way. Check out Matt's work at Fansided NFL. Does a phenomenal job. Biggest story in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers, what he seems to be trying to do, and that's to get out of Green Bay. I still think Denver is the most likely scenario. Your thoughts on what's going on with the Packers and the best quarterback in football?
Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers has thrown his last pass in Green Bay, John. And, I was speaking to sources around the league on Thursday afternoon. I couldn't source up and shore up whether or not a formal offer was made. Later reporting come out and said that there was no formal offer made. But I know that the 49ers were in conversations on Thursday afternoon, an hour or two before the draft, before they took Trey Lance with the Green Bay Packers about Aaron Rodgers. And you just look at the way that the Denver Broncos operated in their draft class. They had the chance to take Justin Fields. So you talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and Daniel Jones. They're less married to Drew Lock than either of these teams are to their quarterback, and they passed on Fields. They drafted Patrick Surtain, arguably the best cornerback in this class. They have a lot of weapons there, and I think that Denver is a spot where you could potentially see a trade. I also think a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, a lot of skills, a lot of skill position power there. You have, Darren Waller, Henry Ruggs, Josh Jacobs in the backfield. The Raiders make a lot of sense. I think that Aaron Rodgers winds up getting moved. It wouldn't surprise me if it happens closer to training camp, though.
Fair enough. I'll follow up there then. What's the chance the Packers call Aaron Rodgers' bluff? and they don't get what they think they should get in exchange for him as far as offers go. That this was a rush thing leading up to the draft. Can they get something done? Now they're all stepping back and hoping cooler heads prevail. At least that's what I believe. From the Packers side, it sounds like all three of us agree that's not happening. There's been some bridges burnt here. But at some point, if you're the Packers, do you just say, well, Aaron, if you want to retire, you can retire, but we expect you to show up to camp. We can't get what we want in exchange for you. We tried, just not working, big guy. Sorry. Either show up or get ready to write that check to return some of that bonus money to us if you're thinking about retiring. Will the Packers call his bluff?
I mean, the bonus money is a really interesting component to all this, right? Because, on face value, that's a risk if I'm the Packers I don't think I'm going to take unless I'm in love with Jordan Love, because Aaron Rodgers can just say, okay, I'll go host Jeopardy, because he seems like he has the temperament and the mentality that when he's done with something, he is done with it. There's no going back. And I feel like we've approached, if not crossed that tipping point with the Green Bay Packers and with the organization. But by the same token here, the Packers don't have a lot of motivation to trade him. And, you talk to people around the league, and the sense is you can have disgruntled, unhappy players, but at the end of the day, he's the reigning MVP. He's 39 years old, but he's coming off a career high in touchdowns and over 4,200 yards in passing. You need to find a way to make it work. And unless the Packers believe that Jordan Love is their future, they should be all in on either trying to trade Aaron Rodgers to recoup an asset or mend the fences. And, I think that if they call his bluff, he might just take it, to be honest, because I don't think that that's a situation that he's all that thrilled about going back to. And he's 39 years old. He has a Super Bowl ring. What more does he need to prove if he's not going to get the opportunity to prove it somewhere else?
Read his NFL stuff, read his Giants stuff, and yes, he even sneaks some Eagle stuff in there every once in a while on Fansided. Matt Lombardo, we appreciate you hopping on board with us. Good to see you, bud. We will stay in touch.
You got it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Matt Lombardo here with us on Birds 365. I come back. I got a couple more questions for Johnny Mac about Aaron Rodgers. We'll continue our draft evaluation. Eric Edholm from Yahoo is going to join us next hour. One of their lead draft guys. We had Eric on before the draft. We'll get his thoughts after the draft. But I want to ask Johnny Mac another Rodgers question or two. Coming back next here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.